Thank you for joining us today. Before we begin, I'd like to share a message from our sponsor, BetterHelp. For many years, I struggled with self-acceptance, which affected my relationships because I believed if I didn't like myself, others wouldn't either. However, through therapy, I've improved my self-esteem, leading to stronger connections and a more positive outlook on life. Now, I feel more comfortable with the person in the mirror, and I'm committed to living a long, healthy life, instead of harming myself with unhealthy food and alcohol. After all, life is finite. Why not make the most of it? You might not face the same challenges I did, but if you believe you could improve your life, why not explore options that could help? BetterHelp offers access to licensed therapists who genuinely want to support you. They listen attentively, then provide unbiased, helpful advice. Starting with BetterHelp is straightforward. Simply visit their website, and I would appreciate it if you use our link. Usually within 48 hours, they connect you with a professional experienced in assisting people with issues similar to yours. The platform is designed for your convenience and comfort, allowing you to communicate with your therapist via phone, video chat, or messaging, whichever suits you best, without leaving home. Let BetterHelp facilitate your journey toward improved well-being and a better life. In the autumn of 1983, 16-year-old Colette Arum was training as a hairdresser and lived with her parents in Keyworth, Nottinghamshire, England. On October 30th, she left her home to visit her boyfriend, a walk of about 1.5 miles. Along the way, she briefly stopped to chat with friends, but then continued alone. Tragically, she never arrived at her destination. That evening, around 10:30, her family reported her missing. Early the next morning, her brother discovered her lifeless body in a nearby field, also about 1.5 miles from their house. Her body was left posed provocatively, a detail that haunted her brother for years. Authorities found her head beaten with a bottle, raped, and strangled to death. The police quickly eliminated usual suspects from their investigation. About 2 weeks after the murder, they received an odd letter, written entirely in uppercase letters, with every S replaced by an exclamation mark. Some believed the writer used a ruler to write it. The letter stated, "It is you. You will never find me. I was in the hut for hours, waiting for a girl returning from horse riding. No one saw me. When the car came with keys, I couldn't help myself and took it. Masks are common at Halloween. No one knows what I look like, which is why you won't catch me. I'll go soon, and then you'll never find me." The killer admitted to strangling Colette, claiming he thought she might survive when a passing car distracted him, leaving her injured but alive. He drove around, eventually returning to Keyworth, purportedly to confuse the police and leave a mark of his presence by walking back across the fields. He also implied that she had a blow, a slang term suggesting a signature gesture to show it was him. The autopsy revealed Colette was nude, but part of her hair was tied to her wrist, while the rest draped over her body in a seemingly symbolic gesture rather than as restraint. The police believed this act was a personal signature. The mention of being in a shed, another word for a small outbuilding, waiting for a girl after riding horses, led investigators to search local stables. There, they found a soiled cloth with semen on it, which was tested. They suspected the killer was hiding inside, possibly masturbating while watching young girls ride horses. The letter also referenced a stolen vehicle, a red Ford Fiesta, taken near the shed on the day of the murder, further connecting the clues to the crime scene. This case remains one of the most haunting unsolved murders in the region, with the killer's chilling confession and signature gestures leaving authorities puzzled and investigators determined to uncover his true identity. The search for clues led investigators to a rag found at the scene, alongside the fact that the victim's driver had left the keys in the ignition. Witnesses reported seeing a man driving around Colette's neighborhood in the victim's car, stopping to speak with several women and attempting to persuade some of them to enter his vehicle. After the murder became public, a local bartender contacted the police, recounting that within an hour of Colette's disappearance, a strange man had entered her bar. He ordered a simple meal and a mixed drink of lemonade and orange juice, and she noticed blood on his hands. The man went to the restroom and washed his hands, after which a bloody paper towel was collected by police from the trash. Several witnesses described him as a white man aged between 25 and 35, with dark, curly hair. Authorities released multiple sketches to the public on June 7, 1986. The same year, the BBC introduced Crime Watch UK, a popular true crime series that chronicled unresolved cases, beginning with Colette's murder. Over 400 tips poured in, but no arrests followed, and the case remained cold. In 1993, the authorities finally examined the evidence more closely. They tested the paper towel and a letter found at the scene for DNA. While they succeeded in generating a DNA profile of the perpetrator, it did not match anyone in their database. 2 years later, in 2006, 20 years after the crime aired on the program, the case was revisited on the show's 20th anniversary, yet no new leads emerged. By June of 2008, police arrested a man named John Paul Hutchinson for a driving offense. A DNA sample from him yielded a profile nearly identical to that of the killer. However, he was only 20 years old at the time of arrest, and Colette had been murdered 25 years earlier, making it impossible he was the murderer. Investigators surmised the DNA might belong to a close relative. They discovered that John Paul's father, Paul Stewart Hutchinson, aged 50 at the time of the murder, lived just 7 streets away from Colette's family. The police noted that this man resembled the sketches of the suspected killer. Paul Hutchinson was a father of 4, twice married, with a background as an electrician, businessman, and youth volunteer at his children's school. Without a criminal record, he appeared an ordinary individual, and there was no suspicion against him at first. In April of 2009, 26 years after the murder, police arrested Paul Hutchinson. He maintained his innocence, claiming his brother, who had passed away in January of the previous year, was the real killer. It was subsequently revealed that the hospital had a blood sample from the brother, which was tested against the DNA evidence. The results showed no match. Ultimately, in December of 2009, Paul Hutchinson pleaded guilty to the murder, and in January of the following year, he was sentenced to a minimum of 25 years in prison. 99 months later, on the 10th of October 2010, Paul Hutchinson was found unresponsive in his cell. He was transported to the hospital where he died, reportedly due to a drug overdose. On June 30th, 2007, 74-year-old Fonda contacted the police from her home in Norfolk, Virginia, claiming she was dying. Her 35-year-old daughter, Angel Lee, also lived there. When first responders arrived, they found Angel dead from around 38 stab wounds. Fonda had also been stabbed and was severely injured. In court, it is established that the right of a defendant to face their accuser can be waived if the statement is a dying declaration, made by someone who believes they are about to die and then does. The detective overseeing the case suspected Fonda would not survive and informed her of this. He then asked who attacked them, to which Fonda replied Walter Lucas's name, her former son-in-law. She was swiftly transported to the hospital, but sadly, she passed away the next day. Initially, Walter Lucas was the prime suspect. He had been married to Angel's sister and was considered a close associate of the victims. Police believed that a person close to Fonda and Angel might have committed the murders, especially since there were no signs of a forced entry. However, Lucas had an alibi. He was over 200 miles away at a week-long campout with his son, making him an unlikely culprit. Another reason to suspect Lucas was Fonda's mental state. Given her Alzheimer's diagnosis, she might have been confused when she identified him as the attacker. The true perpetrator remained elusive. The second suspect considered was Angel's fiancé, David Wayne Hosha. He lived with Fonda and Angel, and their wedding was scheduled for just 2 months later. At the time of the murders, Hosha was over 80 miles away, attending a week-long camping trip with his son from a previous marriage, and thus had an alibi. Other potential persons of interest were also cleared. Despite these leads, the case went cold until just over 3 weeks later, when authorities received an unusual letter postmarked in Chicago, Illinois. The letter was bizarre and informal, claiming the writer had met Angel on the beach days before the murders. It depicted her as lonely, with her mother present, and detailed a purported conversation about Angel's desire for a final fling before her wedding. The letter writer described a late-night encounter with Angel, where they kiss and a brief physical intimacy took place. The writer claimed that Angel had second thoughts and couldn't go through with anything further. The letter was odd and lacked clarity, leaving investigators puzzled about whether it pointed to a real suspect or was merely a confessional ramble. After committing his crime, I grabbed my knife and carried out the grisly act, feeling an overwhelming rush. In hindsight, I should have gagged her first, as her screams awakened her mother. If only she had gone to bed early that night, both she and her mother might still be alive. Had the old woman called 911 after hearing her cries, the outcome could have been different. I quickly left town, moving from place to place, making it difficult for anyone to catch me. Perhaps I'll check in with you now and then, but don't bother searching for my prints or DNA. I was wearing a full-body suit and gloves that night, so no evidence was left behind. Approximately 3 weeks after my first letter, authorities received a second message from me. It arrived from Gaylord, Michigan, and was composed with poor spelling. I will narrate it as if written correctly. Detectives, I write again. I must admit I have done it a second time, and it feels incredible to wield that kind of power. The first crime was just the beginning. The rush I experienced is indescribable. The police in my hometown are far more clever than those in the city, so I had to leave behind the windy metropolis. But I haven't crossed the line yet. That's for tomorrow, when I head north into colder lands and perhaps abroad, where I barely know anyone. It's just a farewell, a goodbye to the city that's no longer part of my life. Initially, police thought the killer might have been responsible for other murders somewhere in the Midwest. They examined unsolved cases that might match his profile, but found no significant connections. Nonetheless, the letters were deeply unsettling for investigators because, even if he hadn't killed again, he clearly relished the act of murder. Forensic analysis of the letters yielded no useful evidence. No fingerprints or DNA could be recovered. Police then turned their focus to Angel's diary, which offered clues. In the weeks leading up to her murder, she had noted her fiancé, David Hosha, acting strangely distant, prompting the authorities to revisit him. Since he had access to the house, it seemed logical he might have been involved. However, he had an alibi. He was at a week-long Boy Scout camp with his 12-year-old son, several miles away. Other parents at the camp confirmed seeing him at 11 o'clock that night, and he was having breakfast at 6:30 the next morning. Yet, the police noted that he did not have an alibi for the hour around 1 o'clock, the approximate time of the murder. David Hosha could have easily driven the 80 miles to the crime scene, committed the murders, and then returned unnoticed. In the weeks leading up to the killings, the police kept a closer watch on him. Hosha, an electrical engineer working for a Virginia-based firm with Navy contracts, was rarely at home. He claimed to Angel that he was helping construct a warship in the Midwest. Yet, this raised suspicion because it was unusual for the Navy to build ships inland, far from water bodies like the Great Lakes, especially when Virginia is on the Atlantic coast. When police examined Hosha's computer at the crime scene, they discovered that a week before the murders, he had changed the password associated with someone named Amanda. This piqued their curiosity. They wondered who Amanda might be. It turned out that Hosha had been browsing dating websites and had started a relationship with a woman named Amanda in Michigan. When he told Angel he was away on work, he was actually with her. Further investigation involved interviewing his 3 former wives, along with 3 women he had dated in his 20s. During his first marriage, Hosha had groomed and inappropriately touched a 12-year-old girl, a family friend, while he was serving in the Air Force. The girl and her parents informed military officials that they preferred to see him discharged rather than face criminal charges. His first wife described him as abusive, and subsequent partners accused him of dishonesty, abuse, and infidelity. A major red flag emerged from Hosha's behavior after the murders. When he visited homicide detectives at the police station, he didn't inquire about the purpose of the interview. Another suspicious sign was that he failed to attend his fiancé's funeral. Soon after the murders, Hosha moved to Michigan to live with his new girlfriend Amanda, prompting further doubts about his innocence. Although there were many suspicious aspects, police lacked physical evidence directly linking Hosha to the murders. They searched for connections between the letters sent and him. They obtained his cell phone records and established that on the same day the first letter was mailed from Chicago, he made a call near the post office that processed the letter. When the second letter was sent, Hosha was on a road trip through Michigan, crossing areas like Gaylord. His credit card records confirmed that he made purchases on a highway north of Gaylord before the second letter was mailed, and continued purchasing south of Gaylord afterward. This sequence suggested a strong likelihood that Hosha was in the vicinity when the letters were sent. The odds that one person linked to the Goyas was in those locations precisely when the correspondence was mailed were significant. Finally, in June of 2009, 2 years after the murders, 40-year-old David Hosha was arrested, initially denying any involvement in mailing the letters or committing the crimes. He refused to speak with detectives and requested legal counsel. Before his lawyer arrived, officers managed to speak briefly with his partner, Aman. Alone in the interview room, which was equipped with a camera and microphone, Amanda questioned Hosha about his actions. He responded that he had acted impulsively and lost his composure, insisting he had gone to the house that night to break up with Angel. He claimed the situation spiraled out of control. However, Amanda was skeptical. Why would he leave a Boy Scout camp just to confront the woman he lived with? Hosha also admitted to sending letters, claiming they were meant to mislead the police. Ironically, since the authorities never received these letters, they had little reason to suspect him. Facing the possibility of the death penalty if convicted, Hosha pleaded guilty a week before his trial in October of 2 counts of first-degree murder. He was subsequently sentenced to life imprisonment with the possibility of parole, and is now incarcerated at the Riverdale Correctional Center in Independence, Virginia. On Friday, October 13, 1995, 16-year-old Tanya Smith was preparing to spend the night at her friend Missy Cooch's home in Abbotsford, British Columbia. Located roughly 45 miles east of Vancouver, Abbotsford is a border city between Canada and the United States. Missy's mother and stepfather had gone out for the evening, prompting the girls to walk to a nearby party. Around midnight, despite the well-lit neighborhood, an attacker emerged suddenly from the shrubs, wielding a baseball bat. He forced the 2 teens to pass through the foliage into a grassy area beyond. The assailant ordered Tanya to remove her clothes. She stripped down to her pants and shirt, while Missy kept her clothes on. The attacker then threw Tanya to the ground and mounted her. When Missy tried to defend herself, she grabbed the bat and struck him across the shoulders. The man recovered quickly, blocking her second swing, seizing the bat, and inflicting severe blows on 16-year-old Misty. She lost consciousness and was discovered hours later near an emergency room. Despite multiple skull fractures and broken limbs, she managed to reach help. Meanwhile, Misty suffered hypothermia. Hours after the attack, a fisherman found Tanya's body floating in a canal outside the city. She had been sexually assaulted and beaten with the bat, but was still alive when taken into the water. Her cause of death was drowning. Notably, the medical examiner observed a bite mark on her right breast and found a fiber in her eyebrow, while her clothes had been torn. Despite the severity of her injuries, Misty survived and provided a description of her attacker. She recalled being struck 7 times with the bat, despite her head injuries, and within 5 days of the assault, she worked with a sketch artist to create a composite drawing. 5 days after the brutal attack, a man called the tip line claiming to be the murderer. He revealed details only known to the killer or investigators, like Tanya's bitten breast, which had not been publicized. Police traced the call to a payphone in a park where it had been made, but the text cuts off before revealing further details. In the aftermath of the investigation, numerous individuals examined the crime scene, desperately searching for fingerprints on the phone, but they found nothing of any value. Hours later, a man placed a call to the emergency center, confidently claiming he would not be foolish enough to leave fingerprints behind. Less than 20 minutes afterward, he called again, this time claiming he was driving around in search of someone else. Law enforcement was only able to trace the second call, made just a few blocks from the police station. But when officers arrived in the area, the phone was no longer in use, and no one had noticed anyone nearby using it. The investigators were deeply troubled by these calls. The killer's voice sounded cheerful and excited, reinforcing their suspicion that he was actively seeking another victim. On Halloween night of 1995, he called 911 once more, talking explicitly about biting a woman named Tanya's breast. In response, authorities established a special hotline where the public could listen to recordings of these chilling calls. A month after the assault, on November 17th, a new sketch of the suspect was released. Yet, no arrest followed, and no charges were filed concerning the murders. DNA analysis was performed on semen recovered from inside Tanya's body and saliva from her bitten breast. Forensic experts confirmed both samples matched, indicating they belonged to the same perpetrator. However, no genetic match was found in any criminal databases. Almost a year later, on February 17, 1996, a radio station in Abbotsford received an eerie call. The caller instructed the DJ to step outside into the parking lot. There, the DJ discovered something unsettling. The headstone of Tanya Smith perched atop a police car. Written in pen across the photograph was a chilling message. She was not the first victim, nor would she be the last. The caller stated he was still searching for others, ominously warning that one day Misty and others could fall prey without anyone finding him. Once again, he referenced biting Tanya's breast. 2 days later, the killer phoned 911 and taunted law enforcement, asking how they liked his latest present, threatening that it would not be his last. Moments after, a distressed single mother, alone with her children, called emergency services. Someone had thrown a wrench, attached to an envelope with tape, through her living room window. The message on the envelope, written in black marker, identified the sender as the Abby killer. Inside the dark blue envelope were 4 newspaper clippings and a letter. 2 articles detailed Tanya's murder and the attempted slaying of Misty. One showed Misty's face with the words, "Lucky to be alive," scrawled across her forehead. The other 2 dated back to 1989, over 5 years earlier, and related to unsolved murders of women in Vancouver during 1985. Law enforcement was disturbed that the killer had kept these old articles for so long. They believed the artifacts held particular significance for him, likely linked to his past crimes. The first murder had occurred on February 21st, 1985. Linda T., an 18-year-old sex worker struggling with drug addiction, had turned to prostitution after fleeing her home at 15. She was brutally stabbed multiple times, her throat slashed. Police classified her death as a case of overkill. The second victim was a 24-year-old woman with details confided further as the investigation continued. On the night of September 5th, 1985, old Colleen, working as a legal secretary, disembarked from a bus around midnight. She was immediately attacked, dragged behind some bushes, and sexually assaulted before being brutally stabbed to death. An act characterized by excessive rage and violence. This pattern of overkill was evident once again in her case. Later that year, on December 4th, 1985, a third murder occurred, an incident that also bore signs of overkill. The victim, 25-year-old Kim Stalberg, a secretary like Colleen, had spent her evening setting up a celebration at her father's engineering office for her parents' 25th wedding anniversary. She was found there, murdered by stabbing, with the killer showcasing a similar ferocity seen in the previous cases. All 3 murders shared common traits. They appeared sexually motivated, with the women chosen as victims primarily because they were alone, and vulnerable at the moment of attack. These murders were marked by extreme violence and expressions of intense rage. In addition to the physical evidence, investigators found a typed letter enclosed in an envelope, which read, "Hello, it's me. Yes, Siri. T's right nipple sure did taste good, by the way. T was wearing sandals that night, and I threw them along with her other belongings. I wasn't a bad lover either. It was me that used that phone from the rotary dial that evening. You police are getting a little irritated, but it's tough to catch someone so clever, unlike naive, stupid crooks. I know my way around. Here are some of my conquests. I told you, these aren't my first and they won't be the last. I don't keep the same method. I've done more than just these. Check out references to crimes in BC, Ulta, and some in Washington. Why have you not connected the recent incidents around town? There was a teenage girl near McDonald's on Crescent who I almost sexually assaulted. I grabbed her breast and was about to gag her when she ran off. Also, on Oral Drive, I nearly beat a woman senseless and was about to rape her when a passing car stopped me. I don't need to be seen. An incident across from the hospital was similar. I saw the woman was Native American, and I decided she might have AIDS. I took her backpack, found $200 inside, and tossed it onto an old brick storage area. The writer boasted, "I'm bad. I will strike again, and I won't be caught. I won't leave Abbotsford." The police believed this letter was authentic, as it contained details only the murderer would know. For example, the letter referenced the type of footwear T was wearing that night and mentioned 3 specific crimes. The first involved a teenage girl near McDonald's on Crescent who had been sexually assaulted. A man attempted to gag her and then fled. Several months before the second murder, in July 1995, another girl, just 12 years old, was sexually assaulted near McDonald's in the same neighborhood. She couldn't identify her attacker but noticed a tattoo of an anchor on his arm. The letter also described an incident on Oral Drive, where the author nearly assaulted a woman, implying a pattern of escalating violence and opportunity. Once, a reference was made to an attack on a woman walking alone in the evening. She was suddenly struck from behind and knocked out. When she regained consciousness, she was being dragged, but a passing car caused her attacker to flee. Nearby, it was noted that the incident occurred just across from a hospital, the same one where a woman named Misty had been assaulted 2 months earlier. Initially, I suspected the attacker was indigenous, but after examining her backpack, which contained $200, I dismissed that idea. I also found her purse, stolen during the attack, on the roof of an old brick store, confirming the crime occurred in that area. The woman attacked outside the hospital was not First Nations but Eastern European. In darkness, she could have been mistaken for a native woman. She had $225 in her purse, which was stolen. No one had been arrested for the attack so far, but investigators uncovered an important clue. A fingerprint on a tape attached to a wrench did not match anyone in the database, and it was not found in the police records from April 30th, 1996. In a subsequent press conference, authorities released a flyer featuring sketches of the suspect, depicting his face, full body, a tattoo, as well as images of a van and car seen in the vicinity during the calls. They urged the public to call the hotline and listen to recordings of the killer's voice. Just 3 hours later, a woman contacted the police, convinced that her son, 30-year-old Terry Driver was the man they sought. She recognized his voice in the recording. Terry enjoyed fishing in the canal where T's body was found and had mentioned attending Tanya's funeral to his family. He lived near the payphone used for the fifth call. The police interviewed Driver, who denied killing T and refused to provide a DNA sample or fingerprints. They observed that he did not resemble the sketch very closely, but they understood Misty's description, which she gave after being struck on the head with a baseball bat. Eyewitness accounts, especially after head injuries, are often unreliable, yet the police noted that his voice closely matched that of the caller. To investigate further, they looked into his background. Terry Driver was born in January 1965 to a father who was a retired police officer. His early life was marked by brain damage from birth, leading to behavioral issues. At age 5, he was placed in a facility for children with behavioral problems, and during that time, his parents divorced. As a child, Driver was violent towards people and animals. In 1996, he had moved from Abbotsford to Vancouver, was married, and had 2 children. He worked at a printing company, and the police examined his employment records thoroughly. On May 3rd of 1996, an investigation took a significant turn when police realized that Terry Driver was not at work during the times calls had been made. That same day, Driver consented to be fingerprinted, and one of his prints matched the evidence found on a tape linked to the case. Consequently, he was arrested nearly 7 months after the murder. Further DNA tests confirmed his connection. A saliva sample from Driver matched the evidence from the crime scene, and fibers pulled from his vehicle's trunk corresponded to a fiber found on the victim's body. In September of 1997, Driver faced trial, with prosecutors confident they had a strong case. They presented clear evidence. The victim's body contained a bite mark with Driver's saliva, and fibers from his trunk matched those found in the scene. Driver chose to testify on his own behalf, offering a bizarre account of the events on the night of the murder. He claimed he was engaged in scanner chasing, monitoring police radio calls and heading to the scene after hearing about the attack. He alleged that he had been in the area when he saw a man emerging from some bushes, and he discovered the victims, Misty and T, already beaten and lying on the ground with a bat nearby. Driver asserted he initially considered calling the police, but refrained, fearing that such action might implicate him. Instead, he claimed he decided to assault T. During the assault, he purportedly put her right breast in his mouth, and when she convulsed, he unintentionally bit her. After realizing she was dead, he panicked, moving Misty into the front seat and T into the trunk, collecting Tanya's clothes and the bat. He then left Misty near an emergency room before driving to a canal to dispose of her body. On his way home, he discarded the bat and clothes in nearby ditches. He also confessed to making threatening calls, placing a tombstone on his car's hood, writing a letter, and throwing a wrench through a window. However, he steadfastly denied attacking the girls with the bat. The trial spanned 19 days, after which Driver opted for a judge rather than a jury to hear his case. Ultimately, he was convicted of murder and attempted murder. His sentences, serving concurrently, summed up to life imprisonment without parole for the murder of T, and an additional 10 years for the attempted murder of Misty. On August 23rd of 2021, at age 56, Driver died of natural causes while incarcerated. He remains the prime suspect in 2 unsolved murders from 1985. Evidence in those cases included articles found in an envelope linked to the crimes. Police identified the victims as 18-year-old Linda Tat Ray and 24-year-old Colleen Shook. DNA analysis of evidence under the fingernails of a third victim, 21-year-old Kim Strawberg, did not match drivers, leaving her murder still unsolved. That concludes today's presentation. Thank you for taking the time to watch.